Hi everyone, today we'll be going over the maintenance section in your TenantCloud account. TenantCloud allows you to track, organize, and expense any of your maintenance requests that you get from your tenants or that you put in yourself. First, from the dashboard, we will go over to the left-hand menu and click on Maintenance, and the first page that we'll view is Request. From here, at the top right, you have the button to add request. You can also change the view from the list view to the detailed view, which will have your tiles on the left-hand side and the information on each maintenance request on the right. If we go back to the list view, there will be a little settings icon here. So first we'll start by looking at these maintenance request settings. On the maintenance settings, you can see here at the top you have the option to set how many days in advance your recurring service requests will post. We'll go over recurring request later in the video. Below that is your privacy settings. TenantCloud defaults to create a new message with each maintenance request that is submitted. There will be a channel that has you, the tenant, and the service pro. If you don't want it to make a new message chain every maintenance request, you can turn that off down here at the bottom. I'm going to leave mine on, and then above that is those privacy settings. On top, you can see that you can decide whether or not you'd like the tenant information to be shared with the service pro. You can decide if you'd like to display the email address or the phone number. Below that, you can decide if the service pro will be shown to the tenant. Again, you can decide if you'd like to share the email address or the phone number. If we scroll back up to the top on the second tab, we'll take a look at the automation settings. The top section is for our property management companies or property managers. Here you can decide if you'd like to share the maintenance request automatically with your owners. You can see here that my option to automatically share all maintenance requests with the owners is grayed out, and that's due to the fact that my owners have not accepted my connection request and connected with me on TenantCloud. Once they have created an account and are connected with you, you will be able to toggle that to green. Below that is maintenance request automatic assignee. So this is where you can auto assign maintenance request to a specific service pro. This setting here would be a global setting, so if I did pick my handyman here, all of my properties are going to go to his service pro account. If you ever want to assign service pros per property for the maintenance request, you'll actually do so by going to portfolio on the left-hand side and then properties. And then I'll pull up the property I'd like to assign to the service pro, and I will click service providers, and to the right you can click assign under maintenance request assignee. So here I can choose my handyman, and now he will be assigned all the maintenance requests from this property. Let's go back to that automation settings tab under maintenance settings. Down at the bottom, you'll be able to review requests. With this toggled on, the service pro will not be able to resolve that request until you've reviewed it. If this is off, the service pro would be able to mark that request as resolved and submit that as finished to you. Now that we've taken a look at settings, we'll go back to maintenance on the left-hand menu and go back to that request page. Here, as I said before, you can do the list or the detail view. I'll keep the list view, and at the top you can filter these requests by the status of the request, the property or unit, who the request is assigned to, the tenant that the service request is from, the request schedule, the category of request, the priority, and the equipment status. Here you can see all of my maintenance requests, new, resolved, canceled, all listed here. And at the top right, I will click Add Request. Today we'll be going over a basic request and an advanced request, so let's start with the basic. Once we hit get started, it will ask us the category that our request is about. So we will say outdoors for this one, and then we will say that there is some trash overflowing in the dumpster. After you've narrowed down the category and the problem, you'll be asked if you have any attachments or videos to upload. So I'll go ahead and attach my picture. Once that's uploaded, I can hit next, and then I'll be able to describe the issue in greater detail. After I've added some more details, I can hit continue. Then it will ask me what property this is from. You can do just the property, or you can do the property and the unit. So I'll just do just the property. And then you'll be asked what priority this request is. So we will say this is high priority because we don't want our property to look messy, and we'll hit create a request. Once I've made that request, it will ask me if I'd like to assign a service pro or find a service pro. For finding a service pro, you will be asked the due date of the request, the average request estimation, and when this request for a service pro expires for you. I will go ahead and assign a service pro, and I can do so by scrolling down on the request if I exit out of that pop-up, and under assignee information all the way to the right you'll click add assignee. Here I can select from my list of service pros, and I can share and post this request to the service pros dashboard. Once my service pro is assigned to this maintenance request, I can also add my tenant if I'd like. So we'll go ahead and add my tenant. Once a tenant is added, you don't necessarily have to share it with the tenant, but you can. If you add the tenant, you'll have the option to share that right here. I can also add any material, any equipment that I used, transactions, either an expense or an income invoice from a tenant. And we'll go over all of these additional information in the request in depth in the advanced request. So let's go back to the request page, and we'll go ahead and click add request again. This time I'm going to go ahead and click advanced request. As you can see, you're taking to a different setup than the basic request. So first I'll select my category, and we'll do appliances, my subcategory, the issue, and the sub-issue. You can also use a smart search by selecting from the list above, and then it will let you narrow down what that issue actually is. Again, down below, I'll have the option to add more details. So we'll say at the bottom, I'll have those same options to add photos or attachments as well as videos. So I'll go ahead and add my picture. Once I've done that, I can hit continue, and I'll select my property. If I have any equipment that I am going to be using for this maintenance request, I can also link that here. So I will link a dishwasher. You can also record the model and serial number in this maintenance request, and it will be listed under your equipment on the left-hand side. So I'll go ahead and hit create, and I can see here I can share it with my tenant who is pending connecting with me. At the bottom, I can even add what date and time the tenant has said they are available. So I'll go ahead and add a time. And then I can get authorization to enter in the tenant's absence and include that here so that the service pro that completes this request knows that they can go into the property. You can also let the service pro know if there's any animals in the unit. On the next page, I will see the date that it was initiated. I can also set the due date on this maintenance request, and I can change that priority again. So we'll go ahead and say hi. You can also add materials that you've used during this repair or that you will use during this repair. So I'm going to go ahead and put a solenoid, and you can hit create a request. I will then get that pop-up again where I can find a service pro or I can assign a service pro. So I'll assign a service pro. From here, I'll pick my handyman, and again, you'll have that share and post option to the service pro's dashboard. As you can see here in the maintenance request, you do have a lot of information as well. At the top right, you'll have that great timeline feature that's been seen throughout the software. And here you will have a date and time stamp of everything that's happened with that maintenance request. You can also add internal notes for the maintenance request, upload files, and even add tasks to go with that maintenance request. Next to that, at the top right, you'll have the change status button, and this is where you can decide what step in the completion process this maintenance request is in. So we'll go ahead and say in progress. If I was connected to my service pro and my tenant, I would have the option to chat with them in here as well. And this will keep these messages separate from your normal thread with your tenant. At the top right, you'll have the actions button where you can edit that maintenance request. You can make it recurring, or you can print it. So if we make it recurring, it will give us our categories auto-filled from the maintenance request that we're making it from. You can select your start date and your end date for that recurring request. So we'll do March. You can set the frequency, how many days in advance you'd like to post it, and then you can add or edit those details for that recurring request. Down below, you'll see the description as well as any of the video or photos that you uploaded for the request. Under assignee information, you'll see the service pro that it is assigned to, and you will be able to see when they started the work, when they ended it, how much labor time was used, and if keys were returned. And this will all be filled out once you've resolved the maintenance request. Down below that is the tenant's information, including what time, date and time they said we could enter, and their pets. You'll see below that any materials I used, the equipment I attached, and then you'll also have a transaction section. Here, if I know that the tenant is the one that damaged this solenoid on the dishwasher, I can click money in and charge the tenant for the repair. So we'll say we'll charge him $50. For our property managers and property management companies, you can make this visible to the owner. That way it is calculated in the owner distribution. If you, as the management company, keep these fees yourself, you will want to leave that not visible to the owner. You can also mark it as paid, and I can select the tenant that it goes to. I can also add any accounting tags and any details I want about the invoice. If I had a receipt from my Service Pro, I could also upload that here for the tenant to see on their invoice. Now that I've created the invoice for the tenant to pay me for the maintenance request or the repair, I can go ahead and pay the Service Pro as well by clicking money out. So we'll say he gave us a new dishwasher, so we will pay him the $400 and I'll mark it as paid, and you'll pick your Service Pro as the payer payee. Again, you could add those tags. If I paid with my credit card, I've added this tag in a previous video, so I could select that and let myself know that I paid this repair with my credit card. Again, I could upload any invoice or receipts from the Service Pro to this invoice and hit create. Since I marked it as paid, I'll go ahead and select my payment account, the method, and then I can add any payment details. Now that I've paid my Service Pro and I've charged my tenant for breaking the dishwasher, I'll go ahead and change the status to resolved. Once I hit change on that, I'll be asked to fill out all of the information on how this maintenance request was completed. So we'll say they started work today and they completed work this afternoon. I can log how much labor time was used. It will also have my supplies and materials where I can add more if there were additional used, if there were any keys returned, and any comments. These comments are an internal comment and will be shown on the timeline section of the maintenance request. And I'll go ahead and hit resolve. As you can see, if I hadn't already done my accounting, the invoicing the tenant for the repair or logging an expense for the Service Pro, I will be prompted to after I've resolved that maintenance request. Next, under maintenance, we'll take a look at the request board. The request board is a great way to view and manage your maintenance request. As you can see, each column is a different stage in the completion process. So it will show you what all you have new, what you've got in progress, in review, resolved, and then what's been canceled. You can also drag and drop these to the next stage and update the information accordingly. At the top, you can filter by property and units, the assignee, the tenant that the maintenance request is associated with, the request schedule, the category, the priority, and the equipment status. This request board is only available for our Pro and Business plans, so if you are interested in taking advantage of this great way to visually see and organize all of your maintenance requests, please reach out to us at support@tenantcloud.com. The last page in the maintenance section that we'll take a look at is the recurring. This will show all of your recurring requests that you have in your system. You can filter this view by displaying what's active, future, or ended, your property and units, the schedule that the recurring request is on, the category of that request, and then the equipment status, whether it is linked or not linked. You do also have the quick button to the maintenance settings at the top right, and then next to that, you'll have the option to add a new recurring request. So we'll go ahead and add one. We'll go ahead and make one as if it's the summer and we need to check on the pool every so often. So we'll do outdoors. And then we'll add a little details. add the property, and then my start date, I'm going to say we started this in May of 2025 and we'll end it this month. You can change the frequency. We will do every 2 weeks, and then I can decide how many days in advance I'd like to post it. So I'm going to do same day, and then I'll hit create. So now I have this new recurring request, and if I go back to recurring, I can see here that it'll be listed here. Since I made this recurring request with a backdated start date, if I go to request, I can now see that there's 8 new requests here for those pool cleanings, and I could go through and complete the ones that have been completed, add any notes that were noticed each time I clean the pool, and then resolve those. Lastly, we'll take a look at a report that you can pull whenever you are trying to get a better idea of your maintenance request. So we'll go to reports on the left-hand side, and then we'll pull maintenance request under the rental reports. Here I can see all of my maintenance requests, their status, the priority, the title, when it was initiated, the due date, and then when it was completed. You can filter this by date, property and unit, owner, assignee, which would be the service pro or yourself or a team member, the tenant, the status of the maintenance request, the priority, and then the category and subcategory. You can also edit these columns to include more information or take away information. And that is the maintenance section of your TenantCloud account. As you can see, TenantCloud makes it super easy to track, organize, and resolve those issues as they come in, and even gives you different ways to track any expenses that were incurred for those requests. Thank you for joining today. We hope to see you at our next one.